They left him for dead, but fate had other plans. What happens when a forgotten dog crosses paths with a forgotten child? This is their story. Some say the forest keeps secrets better than people do, that on quiet winter nights, when the wind howls through the trees, it whispers the stories no one dares speak aloud. One of those stories begins with a rusted chain, a wounded dog, and a 12-year-old girl who stumbled into something far greater than she understood. This is not just a tale of survival, it is a story of redemption, loyalty, and love that defied every expectation. Welcome to Vale Marks, where every scar tells a truth. Watch till the end, because what waits there might just change the way you see the world. The sun had just begun to dip behind the maple trees, casting long shadows across the frosted forest floor, when 12-year-old Ellie Carter realized she'd lost her backpack. It had fallen off sometime during her shortcut through the woods behind her grandfather's farm, and though she knew the trails well, having grown up in the sleepy town of Maple Hollow, Vermont, she wasn't supposed to be out past sunset. But Ellie was stubborn, more curious than cautious, and determined not to get in trouble again with Grandpa Frank. So she retraced her steps beneath the pale hush of evening, the kind where the cold air clings to your cheeks and everything sounds louder, each crunch of leaf, each snap of a twig. It was on a path she usually avoided, overgrown, lined with rotting logs and tangled briars, that she heard something strange. A sound that didn't belong to the woods. Not quite a whimper, not quite a growl. It was more like a breath, strained, ragged, alive. Ellie stopped in her tracks. Her eyes scanned the underbrush, and then she saw him. He was lying between two mossy stones, half covered in fallen leaves and dirt. A pit bull, large and muscular, though his body looked thinned out from hunger. His fur, which might have once been a deep silver gray, was now streaked with mud, blood, and crusted scabs. A thick, rusted chain bit into the flesh around his neck, tethering him to a stump that had long since lost any sign of purpose. His chest rose and fell in shallow waves. One hind leg was stiff, awkwardly bent, and the wound on his front paw looked raw and infected. But it was his eyes that stopped Ellie's breath. They were golden brown, almost human in their intensity, staring at her not with fear but with something older, deeper. Resignation? Or was it hope? It was hard to tell, but whatever it was, he didn't flinch, didn't bark, didn't bare teeth. He just looked at her, as if he had been waiting. "Hey there," Ellie whispered, crouching slowly, her fingers brushing against the cold earth. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The dog didn't move. Careful not to make sudden gestures, she inched closer. Her heart pounded in her chest, both from fear and something else, an ache she couldn't name. When she was close enough, she saw the glint of something hanging from the thick chain, a small, worn metal tag in the shape of a shield, carved crudely into it, just one letter. H. She swallowed hard. "H, huh? That your name?" The dog blinked once. Slow. The chain was tangled tightly, and it looked like it had been there for days, maybe longer. Ellie pulled out the multi-tool she kept in her coat, the one Grandpa Frank gave her last Christmas, and began sawing carefully at the rusted links. It took time, and she cut her palm in the process. But eventually, the last piece snapped free. The pit bull shifted slightly, let out a quiet grunt, and tried to stand. He couldn't, not fully. His back leg gave out, and he collapsed again into the leaves. "Wozy," Ellie said quickly, gently pressing her hands on his shoulders to keep him calm. "I'll figure something out. Just hang in there." She removed her backpack, finally found, half buried near a tree trunk, and laid it down as a pillow for his head. She then pulled off her own scarf and wrapped it around the bleeding paw. "I can't take you home," she murmured, glancing toward the dimming sky. "Grandpa, he'd never let me keep you. He's not a fan of dogs, especially not your kind." The dog blinked again. "But I know a place. It's not much, but you'll be safe there, at least for tonight." And so began the strange trek. Ellie, barely 5 feet tall, dragged a pit bull nearly twice her weight, using a broken sled she'd found leaning against an old pine earlier in the fall. She bundled him in her coat and whispered to him all the way, as if her words alone could keep him conscious. The path was long, and her arms shook from effort, but finally, just beyond the edge of Carter Farm, she reached what used to be her father's apiaria, small dusty shed, once used for keeping bees, now abandoned and half forgotten. The door creaked open with effort. Dust motes danced in the fading light. She laid Harley, because that was what she decided to call him, Harley, on a nest of old blankets and straw, covered him with a spare tarp, and sat beside him in the flickering beam of her flashlight. "I don't know who did this to you," she said softly, "but I swear, I'm not going to let you die out here." She gave him water from her thermos cap, wiped the grime off his snout with her sleeve, and sang to him quietly, just nonsense, humming like her mom used to do when she couldn't sleep. Harley drifted in and out of consciousness, eyes fluttering, but even in his dazed state, his body leaned slightly into her warmth. His breath slowed. The fear faded from his gaze. Ellie stayed until the chill turned her fingers numb. She made sure the door was shut tight and covered the cracks with extra cloth to keep out the wind. Then she slipped away silently into the night. What she didn't know, what no one in Maple Hollow knew, was that Harley wasn't just a lost pit bull. He had once worn a vest with a badge, once rode in armored trucks, once stood guard beside men in uniform. He was trained to fight, to search, to protect, until something went wrong. Something they never reported. And someone wanted him gone. But Harley had survived. And now, by pure chance or strange fate, he had found his way into the care of a girl who saw more in him than a monster. And that would change everything. Ellie Carter had never been good at keeping secrets. Not from her teachers, not from her friends at school, and especially not from Grandpa Frank. But for some reason, keeping Harley hidden felt different. It wasn't about lying, it was about protecting something precious. Or maybe someone. By the second morning after she'd found him, Harley was already stronger. He still limped badly on his back leg, and he flinched at sudden noise, especially thunder and the slam of wooden doors, but his eyes no longer looked dull. They were sharp now, tracking her every move as she stepped into the old apiary shed, her arms full of canned food and a worn quilt she'd borrowed from the barn. "Morning, soldier," she whispered, crouching beside him and offering a piece of chicken she'd snuck from dinner the night before. "How's the leg?" Harley didn't answer, of course, but his tail thumped once, a deliberate beat. She smiled. He had started following her around the shed, just a few steps at a time. His gait was uneven, but his mind was alert. And when she'd jokingly said, "Stay," he had frozen mid-step. Later that day, she tried a few more commands. "Down. Come. Find it." And each time, Harley responded instantly. No hesitation. No confusion. Something clicked inside Ellie. This wasn't just a smart dog. He was trained. Highly trained. But by who? And why had they left him for dead in the woods? She spent the next few days sneaking him food, wrapping his leg with fresh bandages, and whispering made-up stories about what their lives would be like when he was better. "Maybe we'll move to Canada," she mused one afternoon as Harley rested his chin on her knee. "Grow blueberries. Open a dog cafe. No uniforms, no chains." The mention of uniforms made Harley's ears twitch. She noticed that. She noticed everything. At home, things were trickier. Grandpa Frank Carter, a Vietnam vet, with a gruff voice and a limp he never talked about, was not the kind of man you snuck things past easily. He knew every creak in the house, every missing nail in the barn door, every raccoon that ever dared steal from the compost bin. He also despised pit bulls. "They're unpredictable," he had said once, shaking his head at the television during a news story. "Muscles with teeth. No place for them in a decent home." Ellie had never said much then, just nodded. But now, with Harley in her life, she felt every word of that memory like a thorn in her chest. She kept her routine tight. After school, she'd head to the shed under the excuse of exploring the woods. She'd take scraps from the fridge when Grandpa napped in front of his weather channel. If she had to run into town, she'd rush back like she was guarding a secret treasure. But even with all her careful planning, small cracks began to show. One evening, while she was brushing Harley's coat, she heard her grandfather call from the porch. "Ellie, we had a kibble again?" Dang dog food's disappearing faster than we use it. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She scrambled outside, trying to look casual. Maybe the raccoons again? She offered, forcing a laugh. He narrowed his eyes. Raccoons don't know how to open the feed bin. Neither do possums. She shrugged. Maybe I forgot to latch it. Oh. He grumbled, but didn't press further. Still, she could tell he was watching more closely after that. Meanwhile, Harley began to settle into the rhythms of his secret life. He learned to recognize the sound of Ellie's bike tires on gravel. He waited by the shed door before sunset and curled beside her boots when she read him chapters from old mystery novels. Sometimes she caught herself speaking to him as if he were a person sharing memories about her mom, who had passed when Ellie was just 7, or fears she didn't dare admit aloud. "You get me," she'd whisper into the soft fur behind his ear. "Even if nobody else does." The bond between them deepened, but all of it nearly came undone the night the storm rolled in. Thunder rattled the windows of the farmhouse, and Ellie, ignoring Grandpa's warnings to stay inside, dashed toward the apiary with a flashlight and a dry blanket. She hated the thought of Harley alone in the cold, terrified. She was halfway there when she heard the low growl. A black bear, large, wet, and furious, had come down from the hills, likely driven by hunger and the sudden change in weather. It stood not 20 feet from her, sniffing the wind, eyes fixed in her direction. She froze. The flashlight slipped from her hand. The bear moved. And then, like a bullet from the shadows, Harley shot past her. Ellie barely processed it. Just a flash of gray, a ferocious bark, and the sound of growling that wasn't the bear's. Harley threw himself between her and the animal. Teeth bared, stance low and solid despite the injury. He didn't attack blindly. He stood like a soldier guarding a line, refusing to let it be crossed. The bear reared back, startled by the sudden resistance. It let out a warning roar, but Harley didn't budge. That was when the porch light snapped on. Frank Carter appeared, shotgun in hand, eyes squinting through the rain. "What the Ellie? Get down." But by then, the bear had already turned. It gave one final grunt and lumbered off into the night. Ellie collapsed to her knees, soaked and shaking, her arms thrown around Harley as he panted heavily but otherwise unhurt. Frank walked toward them, slowly, the gun lowered but his face unreadable. For a long moment, he just stared. At the dog, at the girl, at the way Harley leaned into her, like he belonged there. "You've been hiding him," he finally said. Not a question, a statement. Ellie nodded, unable to meet his gaze. "I couldn't let him die, Grandpa. I know what you think about pit bulls. Booth saved me. Tonight." Frank exhaled through his nose. He knelt beside Harley, running a hand along the old chain scar on his neck, then looking at the storm-drenched ground. "That dog's seen more than we know," he murmured. "And I reckon, so have you." He didn't say anything more that night. But the next morning, there was a clean dog bowl on the porch. And Harley? He was finally allowed in the house. It was late morning when the stranger arrived. His truck was too clean for the dusty back roads of Battlefield, and his shirt, though casual, couldn't hide the way he carried himself, upright, alert, like a man used to being obeyed. Ellie Carter was stacking wood behind the porch when she saw him talking to Grandpa Frank near the gate, one hand resting on the frame of the truck, the other holding up a photograph. Even from that distance, she could see what was on it. "Harley." She dropped the kindling. "Just checking the area," the man was saying. His voice was smooth, with a hint of authority that rubbed Ellie the wrong way. "Name's Raymond Cole. Used to be with law enforcement. Retired now. I've been searching for a missing dog. Thought I'd check out the forest near your property. That okay with you, sir?" Frank didn't answer right away. His eyes narrowed, brow furrowed under his ball cap. "We don't get many visitors out here," he finally said. "Especially not ones with photos of dogs that look an awful lot like my granddaughter's." Raymond chuckled lightly, holding up both hands. "I promise I'm not looking for trouble. Just want to make sure the animal's okay." He was part of a working unit, one of the best. Been off the grid for a while now. Important to me. We had history. Harley stepped out from under the porch just as Raymond glanced past Frank's hand. The reaction was instant. The pit bull's body tensed. Then he exploded. He barkedno, roared and lunged against the leash, so hard the porch swing rattled. His eyes widened, teeth bared, saliva flying as he growled with a ferocity Ellie had never seen. It wasn't defensive. It was terror-fueled rage. Frank shouted, grabbing the leash just in time. "Whoa, easy there, boy, easy." But Harley kept pulling, eyes locked on Raymond, who had gone pale. For a split second, Ellie caught a flicker of something in the man's face. Not fear, recognition. Harley knew him. Raymond cleared his throat, taking a step back. "Maybe it's not him after all," he said, turning swiftly to the truck. "Sorry to bother you folks. Have a good day." Before they could say anything, he was gone, tires spitting gravel as he sped away down the winding road. Ellie's heart pounded as she wrapped her arms around Harley's heaving chest. "It's okay. He's gone. I promise," she whispered, but her mind was racing. That wasn't nothing. That was panic. Real, old fear. That night, long after Frank had gone to bed and Harley had finally calmed down enough to doze off at her feet, Ellie slipped out of her room and tiptoed down to the barn. Her fingers were shaking as she opened the small wooden box she'd hidden behind the hay bales inside, her growing file of notes and printouts. She'd been researching ever since Harley started responding to commands like a pro, and she'd found something. A case from 4 years ago in Colorado. A botched K-9 raid. 1 officer injured. 1 child saved. And 1 pit bull Harley severely wounded and declared missing. Presumed dead. The official report was vague, redacted, but the name matched. So did the scars. So did the behavior. He wasn't just trained. He was elite. But there was more. Too much didn't add up. The raid had been on a known drug location. The team had gone in with full gear. And according to one anonymous source, someone from within the unit had panicked, turned on the others. Ellie leaned back, her thoughts spiraling. The way Harley reacted, the way Raymond had backed off. There was a truth here, buried deep. Harley wasn't just a missing dog. He was a witness. The next day, while helping Frank repair a fence, she asked casually, "Grandpa, you ever hear of a guy named Raymond Cole?" Frank grunted. "Ray Cole? Yeah, he used to be with Federal Task Force. Got out early. Lot of politics, they said." "Why?" Ellie hesitated. "He came by yesterday looking for Harley." Frank looked up sharply. "He say that?" "Sort of. Said he was checking the woods." But Harley freaked out, like really bad. Frank's jaw tightened. "If that man shows up again, you come get me. Understand?" Ellie nodded. But she wasn't waiting for that. That night, as Harley rested his head on her lap, she unclasped the metal tag on his collar. She had always thought it was decorative just. An old piece of army gear, but something about it felt heavier than usual. Her fingers ran along the edges until she found it. A seam. Tiny. Almost invisible. She pried it open with a knife. Inside was a USB stick. Her breath caught. She ran to the farmhouse. Plugged it into the old computer Grandpa used to play solitaire. A single file blinked on the screen. Unit. 14 footage. MP4. Her heart thudding. Ellie double-clicked. The grainy footage began. Body cams. Chaos. Flashlights slicing through a dark hallway. Muffled shouts. Gunfire. And then Harley. He burst into frame, dragging an injured officer behind a wall. Another angle showed him shielding a small boy with his body, snarling at the incoming threat. Then it happened. One of the officers, barely visible in the dark, turned and fired. Not at the enemy. At his teammate. The frame froze as the shooter stepped into light. Raymond Cole. He didn't hesitate. He took the shot, then ran right past Harley, past the boy, vanishing into the shadows. Ellie slammed her hand over her mouth. He hadn't just abandoned them. He'd betrayed them, killed his own, and Harley had seen everything. She turned to look at the dog, sleeping peacefully on her rug. Her chest tightened with protectiveness. He'd carried that memory alone, hunted, almost forgotten. But now she knew. And now, she could never let him go. The morning sky bled white, heavy with snow, as Ellie Carter wrapped her red scarf tighter around her neck and gave Harley a firm pat on the head. The pit bull, ever watchful, let out a soft rumble. Not quite a growl, not quite calm. Ellie had made up her mind after everything she'd discovered, after the video, after Harley's past had come crashing into their quiet lives. There was no more hiding. She was going to bring him to the sheriff's office. The truth had to come out. But the truth had claws. They hadn't made it halfway down the forest path behind Frank's property before Harley suddenly froze, ears up, body rigid. Ellie followed his gaze just in time to see the dark silhouette of a man emerge from behind a pine. Raymond Cole. He stood like a dark statue in the snow, a heavy coat draped over his shoulders, his breath curling in the frigid air. "Ellie," he said, with that smooth, manufactured calm, "you don't understand what you're doing." Ellie's fingers tightened around Harley's leash. "You lied," she said, voice cracking. "You're not some retired detective looking for his lost dog." Raymond's smile was thin and humorless. "You found that USB, didn't you?" Harley began growling, low and steady, his stance defensive but ready, his leash pulled tight in Ellie's hand. "I didn't want it to come to this," Raymond muttered, stepping forward slowly, his boots crunching the snow. "But that doggie's evidence. You don't know what you're keeping." "I know he saved lives," Ellie snapped. "I know you tried to kill your own team and blamed it on a failed raid." Raymond's eyes narrowed. "You're just a kid. You think you know how this works? That dog saw too much. And you dug too deep." Then he reached inside his coat. Harley reacted first. With a snarl, the pit bull launched forward, knocking Ellie off balance and tearing the leash from her grasp. Raymond barely had time to draw the pistol he was hiding before Harley slammed into him, sending both into the snow. Ellie screamed, but the forest absorbed her cry as wind picked up and the snow began to fall faster, thicker. A storm was rolling in nature itself, closing in around them. At the farmhouse, Frank Carter had just stepped out to check the generator when he saw the broken leash lying on the porch and Ellie's boot prints veering into the woods. His heart stopped. He grabbed the old Winchester rifle hanging by the door and followed the trail through the snow, cursing his aching knees and the fear tightening in his gut. Back in the woods, Raymond rolled out from under Harley, blood trailing from a bite on his forearm. He lifted the gun and fired once, twice. The shots echoed like thunder cracks. Harley yelped and stumbled, blood darkening the white snow beneath him. "Harley!" Ellie rushed to him, kneeling in the freezing powder, sobbing as she cradled his body. Raymond stalked forward, the pistol aimed now at her. "I didn't want to hurt you," he said, voice cold and devoid of emotion. "But if you try to stop me..." A single crack split the air. Raymond jerked backward, his shoulder blooming red as Frank emerged from the tree line, rifle aimed steady. "Step away from my granddaughter," Frank growled. "Right now." Raymond's eyes widened. "You wouldn't shoot an unarmed man." Frank cocked the rifle again. "You sure about that?" Blood mixing with snow, Raymond turned and ran, disappearing into the storm-blind trees. For a moment, only the howl of the wind remained. Frank dropped the rifle into the snow and hurried toward Ellie. "Sweetheart." His hands trembled as he knelt beside her. "Are you hurt?" "No, but Harley." Her words broke as she pointed to the pit bull lying in the snow, still breathing but bleeding from his side. Frank looked down at the dog. This pit bull he had sworn he'd never allow near his family. Now the same dog had nearly died protecting the one person he loved more than life. Without a word, he took off his heavy flannel and pressed it against Harley's wound. "He's not just some mutt," Ellie whispered. "He's one of the good ones. Maybe the best one." Frank nodded, his face carved in stone. "I see that now." The snow kept falling. Blood steamed against the white. And for the first time in decades, Frank Carter held a pit bull in his arms, not with fear, but with respect. They needed to get home. Fast. Frank scooped Harley up, the big dog whimpering but not resisting. Ellie kept close, one hand gripping her grandfather's coat, the other still trembling. They didn't speak on the way back. There was too much to process, too much weight in the silence between the trees. By the time they reached the house, the storm had nearly swallowed the landscape. But they were inside now, safe, at least for a moment. Frank laid Harley on the kitchen floor and barked, "Towels. And my first aid kit. Go." "No." Ellie flew into action, her mind reeling, her heart raw. As she wrapped Harley's bleeding side, Frank knelt beside her. "You did good, kid," he muttered. "I should have listened sooner." "He saved me," Ellie whispered, her hands trembling as she worked. "He saved both of us." Frank looked down at Harley, his hand resting gently on the dog's head. "Then let's save him back." And under the howling wind outside, under the heavy breath of danger still looming, a fragile bond, once broken by prejudice and pain, began to mend, sealed in blood and snow. The snow hadn't yet melted when the official summons arrived at the Carter mailbox. A thick envelope, sealed with the county court's insignia, bearing a name they all dreaded, Raymond Cole. Inside, a formal complaint and motion filed by Cole himself from county jail declared that Harley, the pit bull K9, was property of the state and demanded his immediate transfer into federal custody for evaluation and reassignment. Frank Carter read the document twice, lips pressed into a grim line. Ellie stood beside him, fists clenched, her eyes burning with disbelief. "He's trying to take him away," she whispered. "After everything?" Harley, still wearing a fresh bandage across his flank from the snowy confrontation in the woods, looked up as if sensing the tension. He rested his head on Ellie's foot, quiet and alert. Frank placed a hand on his granddaughter's shoulder. "He's not gonna win. Not this time." The trial was set for midweek at the county courthouse. Ellie refused to stay home. She had made a vow to protect Harley, just as he had protected her. The video Ellie had uploaded online just 2 days earlier, showing Harley leaping in front of her to stop Raymond in the blizzard, had already reached tens of thousands of views. The outpouring of comments, shares, and support shocked even the sheriff's office. People wrote from other states, veterans, K9 handlers, animal rights activists. The tide was turning. When the day of the hearing came, the courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Ellie sat near the front, flanked by Frank and their attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Darlene Briggs, who had taken the case pro bono. At her feet, Harley lay calmly, his head on his paws. He wore no muzzle, no vest, just a blue bandana around his neck with Ellie's hand-stitched initials. Across the aisle, Raymond Cole sat in cuffs and county orange, flanked by a lawyer from the Department of Public Safety. He wore a smirk that made Ellie's stomach turn. The judge, Honorable Deborah McAllister, entered the chamber and gavelled the room to order. Her eyes, cool and piercing, swept across the court. "We are here to determine the rightful custody of a canine designated in state records as K9 Harley, alleged to be retired but unaccounted for since the Colorado Task Force incident. The petitioner claims ownership rests with the agency. The respondents argue the animal is no longer government property but a rescue now under their care." "Oh," Cole's attorney opened first, rattling off codes and precedents. According to them, Harley was state property trained, paid for, and deployed under official command. His disappearance was, they argued, a result of negligence, not retirement. Therefore, the state retained the right to retrieve and reassign him. Ellie's jaw tightened. She didn't hear much of the legalese. All she saw was Harley, her friend, her protector, being described like a missing file folder. Then it was their turn. Briggs stood, unshaken. "Your Honor, if we are debating over a piece of equipment, the law is clear, but Harley is not equipment. He is a sentient being with memories, trauma, and loyalty. This court has the authority to consider him under rescue and rehabilitation statutes, particularly after the evidence you will hear today." She nodded toward the gallery. A woman rose and stepped forward. "I'd like to introduce our first witness," Briggs announced. "Retired Officer Maggie Torres." Hissing. There was a murmur in the room. Maggie was once a decorated officer with the Colorado K9 Task Force. She walked with a limp, the result of an on-duty explosion Owen Harley had saved her from. Maggie took the stand, her voice calm but resolute. "Harley was my partner for over 2 years. He was trained in detection, pursuit, and crowd control. But more than that, he was family." She glanced at Harley, and the dog's ears perked ever so slightly. During the operation in question, we were ambushed. Everything went wrong. In the chaos, Harley pulled me from a burning vehicle just before it exploded. I owe him my life. Briggs approached with a file. Did you ever hear of an official report being filed? No, Maggie replied. The report that went public was incomplete. And why do you think that was? Maggie hesitated. Then her gaze locked on Raymond. Because someone on our team made sure it disappeared. I didn't know until now. She opened a folder. Inside was scanned documents, the original mission brief, internal emails, and a personnel complaint buried under layers of bureaucracy. And then came the clincher. A printed still frame from the video Ellie had discovered in Harley's collar. A single image, time-stamped and clear, showing Raymond pointing his weapon not at the suspects, but at a fellow officer. The judge leaned forward. You're stating this dog witnessed an attempted murder? More than witnessed, Maggie said. He tried to stop it. That's how he got injured. The courtroom went still. Even Raymond's smirk faded. When Ellie was called, she stood with her hands trembling slightly. Her voice was soft but unwavering. I didn't know Harley was a hero when I found him, she said. I just knew he was hurting and scared, but he never gave up. Not on himself, not on me. He saved my life. He's not just a dog. He's family. She bent to stroke Harley's head. He blinked, slow and content, then nuzzled her hand. The judge called for a brief recess. The courtroom buzzed with hushed speculation, the tension thick. Outside, a crowd had gathered locals, reporters, strangers with signs that read, "Harley deserves justice." When court resumed, Judge McAllister looked solemn. This court recognizes the unique nature of this case. Though trained by government forces, the dog in question has demonstrated autonomy, sustained trauma, and exceptional loyalty to his rescuers. As such, and under humane exception clauses, I rule that Harley is no longer considered state property. She paused. Harley belongs to the Carter family. The room erupted not in cheers, but in a collective exhale, as if the whole world had been holding its breath. Ellie buried her face in Harley's fur. Frank stood and rested a proud hand on his granddaughter's shoulder. And Raymond? He slumped deeper into his seat. His final attempt to control the narrative shattered. For the first time in years, Harley closed his eyes, not in fear but in peace. The morning of rescue day dawned crisp and clear, the first real sunshine after weeks of gray skies. In Oak Ridge, a small Vermont town built on maple syrup and quiet traditions, news of Harley's story had rippled outward, becoming something impossible to ignore. Posters were pinned to the grocery store bulletin board. Flyers fluttered in the breeze by the post office. And on Franklin Street, people stopped to read, "Rescue Day. Celebrate Harley, a hero with 4 paws." Ellie Carter stood at the edge of the parade route, clutching a sign she and her best friend, Jonah Bennett, had painted together. It read simply, "Voices for the Voiceless," but beneath the lettering, they'd drawn a silhouette of Harley's head, ears up, brave and alert. Jonah, son of the local journalist, stood beside her, camera strapped around his neck, ready to capture every moment. Jonah swallowed nervously, glancing at the crowd. "Ellie, we actually did it." She squeezed his shoulder. "We did." They had started the group only 2 weeks ago, after Ellie posted that video of Harley saving her. The group's mission sounded modest but felt enormous. Rescue abandoned dogs, offer them shelter, and raise awareness for canine protections nationwide. Within days, people had stepped forward, veterinarians offering free checkups, families opening their doors, and volunteers talking about rescue plans. Now, Rescue Day was real. Frank Carter stood next to them, leaning on his cane with an almost mischievous grin. The man who once refused to let a pit bull on his porch now wore a t-shirt printed with Harley's face and the words, "Hero Dog." Behind him, a freshly built kennel stood, complete with a raised platform and a sturdy roof just for Harley. Frank had stayed up nights constructing it himself, using scraps of wood from his barn and an old blanket from the attic. He'd even sent a letter to the Canine Task Force in Colorado, appealing for policy changes for retired service dogs. He could hardly believe the words he typed. We believe it is time for our heroes on four legs to be treated with respect and care. May Harley's story be a call to action. He'd sealed the envelope with a sense of purpose and hope. A rumble of engines interrupted his thoughts. A local television crew pulled up in a white van, the station's logo emblazoned on the side. The producer jumped out, microphone in hand, and motioned for Ellie and Frank. A camera rolled as Ellie's heart pounded. "Live on Oak Ridge 11. What inspired this day?" the reporter asked, tilting the microphone toward Ellie. Ellie sank her voice into the moment, steady and sincere. "It started with a dog who saved my life. Harley showed me that dogs aren't just companions, they can be heroes, too. We started Voices for the Voiceless, so that every dog like Harley has a chance, a home, and a voice in our community." The camera cut to Frank, standing tall. "I used to think pit bulls were dangerous," he said quietly. "But Harley changed that. He reminded me that every soul deserves a chance, no matter the scars they carry." Behind them, Harley trotted into view, tail wagging, wearing a blue bandana with "Harley the Hero" stitched in white. The crowd cheered, a wave of cheers and applause washing over him. Surrounded by children with their hands out, eager to pat his head, he stood still, soaking it in. Ellie smiled, but inside she felt her stomach twist. This day, this momentum belonged to more than just local news. Already, people from neighboring towns had RSVP'd to the picnic that followed, inquiries trickling in from high school rescue clubs. The story was spreading like wildfire. After the interview, Jonah guided Ellie through the throng of neighbors, volunteers, and curious onlookers. Dogs from nearby households milled with their owners, wearing bandanas matching Harley's. Kids played fetch. A rescue bakery sold peanut butter cookies next to a stand raising money for blankets. Ellie spotted her third-grade teacher, helping glue badges onto caps, and felt a surge of pride so intense it caught in her throat. Midday arrived. An older man with a bushy white beard approached, offering Ellie a tiny medal in a red velvet box. She stared at it, stunned. "From the town council," he said, "for bravery and compassion." Underneath, a small plaque read, "Presented to Harley for his heroic act of saving a life in the snowstorm of this February. Oak Ridge, thanks you." Harley's ears perked as Ellie knelt to place the medal around his neck. The crowd clapped. Tears formed in her eyes when she saw the medal shine against the fur. And then came her speech. Ellie stepped on a small wooden stage built by local Boy Scouts. With Jonah beside her, with Harley at her feet, she drew a deep breath. "This medal isn't just for Harley," she began, voice soft but clear. "It's for all the dogs who never had a chance. It's for every rescue that happened in secret, every dog that sat in a shelter waiting for someone to notice. Today, we're not just honoring one dog's heroism. We're asking our towns, our laws, to stand with them." The crowd hushed. Even Frank in the front row blinked back tears. She continued, "That's why I've submitted an application for Harley to receive a Medal of Bravery from the Canine Task Force. Not just for me or for Oak Ridge, but to show that when you stand up for the voiceless, you change hearts, you change policies, you set an example." Thunderous applause erupted. Nearby, someone started playing a recorded version of "What a Wonderful World," and people swayed, hugging, taking photos. Harley looked around, tail still wagging, as though he understood he'd inspired something big. By afternoon, the ceremony wound down. The van pulled away. The stands were cleared. People shuffled off with hopeful smiles. Ellie knelt beside Harley and whispered, "You're not just our hero. You're everyone's hero." Harley nudged her hand, gentle as a promise. Frank placed a father's proud arm around Ellie's shoulder. "You did good," he said. She felt the warmth of purpose fill her chest. Rescue day was over, but the movement was just beginning, and all it took was one dog, one girl, and a town ready to rise. The old town hall of Oak Ridge had never seen such a crowd. On that crisp autumn morning, more than 200 people gathered in front of the courthouse steps, standing shoulder to shoulder with candles, flags, and hand-painted signs. Some held banners that read, "Hero Dog of the Year." Others wore matching blue bandanas in solidarity with the dog who had become the heart of the town. At the center of it all sat Harley, the pit bull once abandoned, now beloved. The ceremony had been planned meticulously by the mayor's office, but it was the townspeople who brought it to life. Children sat on their parents' shoulders, whispering excitedly. Local shopkeepers closed early. Veterans came in uniform. Even the mayor himself, a usually reserved man, wore a lapel pin shaped like a paw. A stage had been built with a simple wooden podium, wrapped in autumn leaves and flanked by 2 American flags. A brass plaque gleamed under the morning sun. To Harley, for uncommon courage and unwavering loyalty. Hero Dog of the Year, Oak Ridge, Vermont. The ceremony began with a slow melody from the town's high school orchestra. Then came the reading of Harley's story, narrated by Jonah over the microphone. As he spoke of the snowstorm, of the betrayal and redemption, of Ellie's quiet defiance, and Harley's fierce protection, murmurs ran through the crowd. Many wiped away tears. When Ellie stepped forward, microphone in hand, she looked smaller than ever, but her voice carried with a weight that silenced the crowd. She took a deep breath. "I never thought I'd speak in front of so many people," she began, her voice trembling. "But today isn't about me. It's about someone who changed my life." She turned and looked down at Harley, who sat by her feet, tail thumping gently on the wooden floor. "When I found him, he was broken, scared, left for dead in the woods with wounds no 12-year-old should have to see. But even then, even hurt and afraid, he looked at me like he trusted me, like he was waiting for someone to believe he mattered." The microphone trembled slightly in her hands. She paused, gathered herself, and continued. "People always say I rescued Harley, but that's not true. He rescued me too, from silence, from fear, from forgetting how powerful love can be." The audience went still. Frank Carter, standing near the edge of the stage, wiped his eyes. The old veteran, once known for his gruffness and distance, now watched his granddaughter with pride brimming so strongly he could barely contain it. When Ellie's voice caught, he stepped up beside her. Without hesitation, she leaned into his side. Frank looked at the crowd, his voice rough with emotion. "I was wrong about a lot of things. I judged him by his breed, not his heart. But this dog, this family member, he reminded me that bravery doesn't always wear a uniform or speak with words. Sometimes it walks on 4 legs and just stays." The mayor stepped forward, holding the small blue velvet box. He opened it slowly, revealing a silver medallion engraved with the town seal and Harley's name. "Harley, in recognition of your service, loyalty, and heroism, name you Oak Ridge's Hero Dog of the Year." The moment the medal was placed around Harley's neck, the crowd erupted. Applause, cheers, even sobs rippled through the plaza. Harley barked once, as if acknowledging them all. Ellie knelt and hugged him tightly, whispering something only he could hear. That evening, the town played a tribute video on a projector outside the library. People brought blankets and thermoses. The air was filled with the smell of warm cider and pine. As the video faded to black, an extra scene appeared done, no one had seen before. It was grainy footage, time-stamped from a body cam, hidden away in the USB found in Harley's collar. The scene played in silence. It showed Raymond, armed, frantic, and Harley, shielding a small boy as a warehouse explosion roared behind them. Then, in a split second, Raymond turned his weapon not toward danger, but toward his own. A shot, then chaos. But Harley had already moved, dragging the boy from the debris, bloodied but alive. Then darkness. Gasps rose from the crowd. Whispers swirled. The truth had been revealed completely. Back on the courthouse steps, Ellie rested her head on Harley's shoulder. The camera panned across the crowd, families, veterans, students, the mayor, Frank, Jonah, everyone who had been part of the journey. And the screen faded to black. Text appeared. "Dogs are not just companions. They are warriors with quiet hearts. And when given the love they deserve, they can save the world." The credits rolled. The town of Oak Ridge would never forget. And neither would anyone who had heard the story of Harley the dog who saved a girl, a town, and himself. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to join this journey by subscribing to Veil Marks. Every view, every comment, every new subscriber is not just a number, it is a spark that fuels the stories we tell. This tale of a forgotten dog and a brave girl is more than fiction. It is a reminder that, as Maya Angelou once said, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. If Harley and Ellie made you feel something today, let us know. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers and beyond. There are more stories, waiting stories that heal, inspire, and remind us what truly matters. This is more than a video. It's a promise.